Oregon is a wagon right now in college football, dude. And I'm not just talking about through the first 3 weeks of the season. I'm talking about we're going to get to November. We're going to be talking about the Oregon Ducks playing for a Big Ten title game. I fully believe that. Now, the reason why this needs to be discussed, Oregon coming into the year, 109th in returning production. They lost Dylan Gabriel. They lost Tez Johnson. Lost some guys on the defense. Totally true. Totally fair to be worried about that. Totally fair to discuss that. But Oregon, even with all that they lost, they are still, for my money, one of the best teams in college football. I don't care that they boat raced Oklahoma State and it was Oklahoma State. I don't care that they beat Northwestern. To me, it's how it looks. It's how it looks. It's what you see on Saturdays that is going to translate to those later months of the season, all right, when they play better competition. They're going to be able to score with anybody. I fully believe that. Dante Moore looks as good as any quarterback Oregon's had under Dan Lanning, and that's saying something with Dylan Gabriel and Bo Nix. The way that the ball comes out of Dante Moore's hand is just different. It's just that's the best way I could say it. You see the pop, you see the velocity, you see the arm talent. It's different, man. And it's different paired with the fact they got different level of playmakers thing on the perimeter. Now, of course, you lost Tess Johnson. You'd love to have Evan Stewart back at some point in time. But I would argue this is maybe as multiple as I can remember Oregon being on the perimeter with the Kenyon Sadiq, who's a freaking action figure at tight end, with DeCorian Moore, who looks nothing like a freshman. We've talked about multiple times on the show. Malik Benson kind of getting back right from his days at Florida State not going how he wanted. You're seeing all the hype around him before he got to Alabama being one of the top JUCO players in the country. You're seeing that translate at Oregon to this point. And I think some of that has to be accredited to one Will Stein and how he's calling this offense. Will Stein, I'll keep saying this, he is going to be a head coach at some point in time in college football. So as long as in Eugene, Duck fans, enjoy this dude. He is creative with his play calling. He's aggressive with his play calling. But at the same time, sometimes you hear, play callers described as aggressive and creative, and they almost get cute. Will Stein's not cute with how they call the offense. It's physical, it's downhill, it has an identity, and they run the football, man. That's what Oregon has done. They're in for 300 yards plus against Oklahoma State. That's something to be noted, all right? The way that he calls the offense fits their personnel, but it's maximized by Will Stein with how they dial it up. I think it's also important to note that the defense, we don't have a filter on them right now. We don't. Oklahoma State, Northwestern, love you, but there's nothing for me to take when it comes to what the Oregon defense is. But I think when you look at the roster, the Oregon defense looks how you would expect it to, given Dan Lanning's football genetics. Coached under Kirby Smart and Nick Saban. Going to specialize in the trenches. Going to be aggressive. It also looks how it should look when you have the backing that Oregon has. They're able to go out and acquire the top players in America and put them on the defense. I think that probably bears some conversation. So while we don't have a great filter to run this defense through right now, I think our eyes aren't lying to us when we watch Oregon play football. They're able to, I think, hang with anybody in the line of scrimmage, and I think that secondary with a Peyton Woodyard, with a Dylan Thieneman, the guys they have on the back end are more than good enough to hang with who they got to hang with when it comes time to those big games in November and ultimately the Big Ten title game. The Dan Lanning persona, too, is maybe what gives him the most confidence in this football team, because the talent's one thing. A lot of teams are talented. A lot of teams have good quarterbacks. But I do think that when you talk about the way this Oregon team is wired, it reflects to me the way that Dan Lanning is wired, which is no nonsense, block out the external, take every game as its own, all the cliche stuff that actually matters in college football that Oregon majors in. That makes a difference, especially late in the year where everyone's beat up, everyone's tired. I think Oregon might end up being one of, if not the most mentally tough team in college football, just by nature of who their head coach is. Dan Lanning has had a lot of narratives around him in his short time as a head coach, but it's funny those narratives never seem to have much staying power with him whenever they're a negative narrative. Because what was the narrative going into last year? Dan Lanning, hey, super talented team. He's a great recruiter. Not a great game day coach, though, because he went for it a couple times against Washington, and I don't know if I trust him when it's the fourth quarter. And then what happens? Ohio State game in Autzen. He outsmarts the rule book. They got 12 men on the field to be able to use to their advantage against Ohio State. Okay. Not hearing much about Dan Lanning as a game day coach anymore. In a negative sense, are we? No. Dan Lanning, there were some murmurs that he couldn't win the big one, which is kind of bizarre because it was only 2 years into his career as a head coach. But, lost to Washington twice, once in the Pac-12 title game. Then what happens? Goes and beats Ohio State in the big game in the regular season. they go out and beat Penn State in the Big Ten title game. Not really hearing that. The narrative that's starting to gain some traction right now is like, well, hey, the defense for Dan Lanning in big spots. Not really meeting the moment so much. The Ohio State game in the playoff obviously bears some concern. Against Washington when he was at Oregon in their Pac-12 days, bears some concern. I hear that. I understand where that comes from. But given the track record of a Dan Lanning versus negative narratives, I'm just going to go ahead and say he's a fixer. I think he's going to fix it. I think at some point in time, Oregon will get in that spot yet again, and we'll talk about, wow, look at the Oregon defense, the way they met that. Look at the Oregon defense flying around. That's a Dan Lanning defense right there, and we'll very quickly forget that people are talking about Dan Lanning's defense in the big spots like that Rose Bowl game and like the Washington game a couple of years ago. So to put a finer point on this, man, I think that Dan Lanning is the perfect blend of old school coach in the sense of like hard on his guys, demands a lot from his guys, but a new school communicator with how he gets the best out of them. You go and look at the hype videos that Oregon puts out. It's the jump around, Pavlov's dogs kind of thing they do before Wisconsin. Says, hey, we're going to play jump around in practice because I want you guys to know when we have this team in the fourth quarter and they play jump around, you embrace that. You enjoy that. You get dialed up for it. Fourth quarter against Michigan, I'm going to call a timeout, and it's going to be thumbs down gladiator style as we see people file out of the stadium. When we play against Oklahoma State, their coach talking smack? No. We're going to make sure that we pour it on to them. 69-3. Handling business. Like, he gets the most out of his players in a way that he's demanding, but also I think he's a player's coach in that same vein, which I think is making him the number one communicator in modern college football for my money. So you got the head coach, you got the roster. I don't care how much they lost a year ago. I just think this is who Oregon is now in modern college football. They're always going to have top-tier talent, and I'm very excited to see what they are here going forward. When it comes to the context of this 2025 season, all right,